Good afternoon, and welcome to another session of ENG3E Term 2A. That's Grade 11 Workplace Preparation English, brought to you by WASA Distance Education Center. I'm your English instructor, Mike Laverty, and today's date is Wednesday, March 29th, 2023. This is class number 26 of a 34 class session. It's our first discussion of Unit 5, so we are on to the final unit of this course. We've wrapped up the first four. Now we just need to work on the unit assignments from Unit 5 before we go into the culminating assignment. And of course, once we've got that culminating assignment wrapped up, we will focus on getting you ready to write your final exam. So we are almost there. We're getting very close here. So we are in week 7 of Term 2A. There's 3 weeks, well, about 2.5 weeks of broadcast left. Graduation date, don't forget, June 15th. It's coming up fast, okay? So less than 3 months away, right? So in the middle of April, you'll be looking at so you got about 2.5 months to plan out your credit. What you can achieve. If you can finish 1 or 2 credits by the time this school year is over, that's awesome. But be realistic with your time. You need about 10 weeks per course, and you've got about 12 to go. So realistically, you've got enough time for sure to get 1 course done. But if anything beyond that, if you haven't started yet, it may be too much to take on. But I will put some contact information up for the WASA office. I strongly encourage you reach out to someone here at the WASA office and talk about your path forward. In ENG3E, we took care of Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3, and yesterday we wrapped up our discussion of Unit 4 by taking care of the culminating activity. So that leaves us half of Week 7, all of Week 8 to finish off Unit 5, and I'm hoping that towards the end of Week 8, we can wrap things up, and I can then transition to talking about the final exam and making sure that you are ready to write that final exam. And it's worth mentioning, as we're getting a few weeks away from that date, that even if you're registered as an independent learner and you're not tied down to the term, you still need to coordinate with your DEC or someone else to proctor or invigilate your exam. So someone's got to be in the room with you when you write the exam. And if that can't be arranged, then you write a course culminating activity, which is 1 final assignment that will be sent to you, and you'll have a few days to work on it rather than a few hours, which is the case with the final exam. It's a timed 2-hour exam. ENG3E is broadcast live Monday to Thursday from 1 p.m. to 1:55 Central Standard Time. If you're listening to us on the airways at 91.9 FM, or maybe listening on Bell ExpressVu, channel 972, thank you for joining us. You can phone in at 1-807-737-4017, or you can phone into the studio at 1-800-465-7144 on our toll-free long-distance number. Or you can watch and listen on Zoom. So if you go to zoom.us, you'll hit the join button, and then you'll enter the meeting ID, 417-6699-799. That info is in the description of the YouTube video. So if you can't watch and listen live, then YouTube's your next best bet. So just search for Laverty WASA on YouTube. You'll find my channel. Start watching those ENG3E playlists. They're up there for you to check out. So as I mentioned, now's the time to reach out to the WASA staff. You can email me directly at mlaverty, MLAVERTY, at nnecschools.org, or find me on Facebook, Laverty space WASA. You can add me as a friend. You can send me a message on Messenger. And if you phone the WASA office, you can phone 1-807 737-1488, extension 2211. So that's 1-807-737-1488. I'm at extension 2211. You can also phone the toll-free long-distance number at 1-800-667-3703. That's 1-800-667-3703. And you can ask to speak to a counselor if you're trying to figure out your next steps and trying to, I guess more importantly, trying to plan out your remaining few months of this school year, how you're going to spend them and what you're going to do. So, all right, so I think it's time that we jump right into today's lesson. We will look at an article of the day. So on the third day of the week, I like to put up an article, usually from the Globe and Mail. That's the newspaper that I read a lot. I don't read the hard copy, but I tend to I listen to articles on my phone. Like if I'm feeling lazy or if my eyes are tired, it'll read an article to me. That's why I love it. And I just read a lot of articles on their website. So we'll look at an article of the day from the Globe and Mail. We're looking at unit assignments 1 through 4 today, and we're going to have a look at 2 textbook readings. So that is the first one is The Unnumbing of Corey Wilhouse, and the second is the Canadian Youth Business Foundation. So 2 of the assigned textbook readings. Your learning goals for today are to do a close reading of a short story and a description of a website. That's what those 2, the Unnumbing of Corey Wilhouse is a short story, and the other selection is a description of a website. That is it was formerly known as the Canadian Youth Business Foundation, and they changed their name to Futurepreneur Canada. So more on that in a second. So that's our 2 readings for today. We will review the elements of narrative. So that's one of your learning goals, is to just review those elements of narrative as they pertain to a short story, and to conduct some online research to learn more about an organization. And you'll be successful if you can reflect upon a short story and your own experiences, right? So as you read the short story, you're thinking about your own experiences and trying to relate to the main character. You'll take notes during the discussion and complete unit assignments 1 through 4. So those are your learning goals, your success criteria for today. All right, so we have an article, and it's called Pitching In, Becoming Part of the Solution by Volunteering with Shelter Movers. So try to tie in an article about volunteer experience. This one was published on March 10th, 2023. And I've got an image from the website, from the Shelter Movers website. And they say, Shelter Movers has completed 1,000 moves, thanks to our volunteers in Toronto, Ottawa, Nova Scotia, and Vancouver. So in those 4 large cities, they are moving women who have been the victims of abuse and are trying to move on to a better life. This organization recruits volunteers, and they help with the moving, and they help with the storage. So they provide moving solutions for these women and their children. So a place to park their stuff while they're looking for a new place, people to physically move their belongings from point A to point B. So it's a pretty amazing organization, and this is an article about them. This is our headline, Pitching In, right? That's the 2 dots. Becoming Part of the Solution by Volunteering with Shelter Movers. Just a quick breakdown of the article, of the headline itself. So pitching in. So pitching is a verb. It's an action word. In is a preposition. It tells you where something happened, when it happened. So, you can jump into the pool, get out of the pool, right? So in, out, under, over, these are prepositions. So pitching in. That's the main title. And then the subtitle is Becoming Part of the Solution. So becoming is a state of being. It's a verb. Part is a thing, it's a noun. Of, another preposition. There's the, and a. An, a, and the are the three articles in the English language, so that's one of them. Becoming part of the solution. And the solution is, of course, a thing. So many times articles or short stories or essays will have a main title that's pitching in. Then they'll put a colon, and everything after the colon is the subtitle. And the subtitle follows by saying, by volunteering with shelter movers. So by and with. Another example of prepositions. These are relationship words. They tell us a relationship between things. They also tell us where things happen, when they happen. Volunteering is an action you can take, and maybe you have taken in the future or do undertake on a continual basis. And shelter movers. So those two taken together is actually what we call the proper noun. And they are capitalized, right? So proper nouns are always capitalized. The names of organization, the names of people, the names of cities, we always capitalize those. All right. Here's the article itself. So this article actually, it's part of a series. It's a series of articles about volunteering. So this one's got like a unique formatting, which is not unlike the memos that we've looked at in this course. Almost like but it's the main information. So I think the Globe and Mail will do spotlights on volunteer organizations, and they talk about or a particular fundraiser. In this case, the organizer is Paul Hewer. His pitch is raising $31,000, and his cause is, of course, the aforementioned shelter movers. So after more than 2 decades working in finance at TD Bank, Paul Hewer retired in 2011 and took up a new interest, volunteering. So that opening paragraph, we've got an introductory clause. And it's a prepositional one. It's after more than 2 decades working in finance at TD Bank, Paul Hewer retired in 2011 and took up a new interest, volunteering, right? So when you use the colon in that case, you're introducing a main idea. Or like I went to the restaurant and ordered my favorite meal, and then you would say what the favorite meal is. Mr. Hewer got involved with several charitable causes, but he felt especially passionate about programs that addressed violence against women. Quote, I just really wanted to draw attention to the problem, and that men really need to be a part of the solution, Mr. Hewer, 64, said from his home in Toronto. So that's, they've added some additional information about his life, the fact that he's 64. So Mr. Hewer, 64, said from his home in Toronto. So we could have put that in brackets, but we put it in commas in this case. He and his wife Judy got involved with Yorktown Family Services, which operates a shelter as well as other programs for women and children. A couple of years ago, Mr. Hewer left the board of Yorktown and began volunteering with Shelter Movers, a national charity that provides free moving and storage services for women and children fleeing abuse. So he eventually transitioned from helping load and unload trucks to coordinating moves. He has organized 50 moves so far, and the charity has helped move more than 5,000 families across the country since they founded in 2016. And then it goes on to say that he's a lifelong marathon runner. He did a half Ironman, and he raised lots of money during these trips. And he's raised $31,000, which he said will be enough to complete more than 150 moves by the charity. Quote, I think the combination of me doing an Ironman and the work of Shelter Movers really resonated, he said. So, yeah, just wanted to have a look at another example of a volunteer experience and just how an article is laid out, right? So it's a what we call like a human interest story. It's a little mini biography about someone's life. You know, we don't get to hear about his whole life, his whole childhood. We just hear about what he's doing right now. But it's a very interesting story, and if you flip through it and if you read through it, there's just tons of great details, and the details are very specific. So it's got all of the hallmarks of writing that I've been trying to encourage students to do in this class. So it's got a main idea, and it backs up that main idea with many relevant and specific details, right? So that's really what it comes down to, right? Is just including lots of relevant and specific details in your writing to make it come alive and to make it interesting and to help your reader learn something, right? So it's about having the details and writing them in a way that, in a sense, tells a story, right? Because that's what that is. It's a story about someone's life and some awesome things they've done with it. All right, so on to the unit assignments for Unit 4. The first unit assignment, number 1, reads as follows. In Unit 1 of your chorus, you completed an assignment about volunteering. Page 12, Assignment 7. Including why you think volunteering is important. So you got to think way back to Unit 1. And, if you can't remember what you said, then hopefully you can dig up your notes and read what you wrote for that question. Perhaps you have chosen to do a little research on the importance of volunteering as part of your culminating activity for Unit 3. Once again, the issue of volunteering appears in this unit. So in the story, The Unnumbing of Corey Wilhouse, Corey decides to become a volunteer. Describe the situation that leads to his decision and how he spends his time as a volunteer. One paragraph containing at least 7 sentences. And question number 2 is, do you think Corey has learned anything from his experience as a volunteer? So these first 2 questions have to do with a short story, which is The Unnumbing of Corey Wilhouse. So I think to read the whole thing would take pretty much all of the class time, so I can't read the whole short story, but I'm going to read parts of it. And we're going to talk about some of the elements of narrative and how they apply to this specific story, and how we understand stories, and how we understand our own story. All right, so this is by Virginia Woolf, a very famous writer. So it's The Unnumbing of Corey Wilhouse on page 192 of our anthology, The Road Ahead. So remember, we're thinking about, so describe a situation that leads to a decision, why he decides to volunteer, and then you got to talk about how he spends his time as a volunteer. And then we got to ask ourselves, has he learned anything? So this is from The Unnumbing of Corey Wilhouse. I'll read the first few paragraphs, and then we'll kind of stop there and have a little quick discussion. Corey Wilhouse's eyelids flipped open before his thoughts had a chance to come to the surface in the pre-dawn dark. The voice on the radio had gone by too fast to convey actual sense, but the words, quote, Kim's Market and Grocery and fire ran in his ears. In the jolt from deep sleep to daily life, Corey knew something terrible was going on. What kind of terrible? The where, the when were only vague fragments of sound. And the radio broadcaster reads, in this morning's commute, you'll want to take it slow coming on to the 36th and 217 connection. There's a traffic signal malfunction there, and the rain isn't making it any easier. And again, Broad Street is closed from 6 and 7 so firefighters can clean up after a blaze destroyed Kim's Market and Grocery early this morning. Looks like rain all day, and here's a tune to get you through the next 4 minutes. The music began. The where and the when suddenly became too clear. In Corey's memory, the backs of Paul's legs pounded up and down, running ahead of him in the late afternoon, and his own feet followed, thudding. His hands clutched little plastic packages, and his brain kept giving orders to his legs. Run faster, faster, faster. They had been 9 years old. It was Halloween. All right, so that's a good time to sort of to pause and to think about the story so far. So you know if we think about the elements of narrative, one of the first things we think of is characters. So we've got Corey. He's the main character. The story's about him. So we got Corey Wilhouse. He's our main character. Or we could use the fancier word, the protagonist. The protagonist is the main character. And as the story opens up, maybe we'll talk about the plot too, right? So so 6 years, 6 years, so 6 years before the story opens, Corey and his friends stole from the store, right? So it says that he was 9 years old when it happened, right? So we can deduce that he's now 15 years old. So he's a 15-year-old high school student, and we know that 6 years prior to the story opening, so 6 years before that morning, Corey was involved in a an incident where he and a bunch of his friends stole from this store, and now he's waking up and he's finding out that this store has broken sorry has burned to the ground. And so he's remembering, so he's trying to forget about these details, but he can't. The story goes on to say that his parents are like wondering where all this Korean food came from. It's got weird names like saki akai, dasi manodeng noodles, kalbi sauce, Korean barbecue seasoning. And so it doesn't seem like his parents ever find out that he did this, but of course, Corey has lived with the guilt ever since that happened, right? And him and his buddies would often talk about it, and they would even say something like, "You're off your Kim." He's off his Kim, meaning somebody was being loony, somebody was being silly. So they even used the name of the store, Kim's Market and Grocery, as like a joke. So that morning, I'm reading from page 195. He got out of bed, made his way to the bathroom, and tried to figure out a way to not know what he knew. Right. So he's obsessed with getting this memory out of his head. He doesn't want to deal with it. He just wants it out of his head. And so the friendship, so I'm reading at the bottom of page 195. The friendship of Davy, Paul, Chipper, and Corey had loosened over the years. They had, in their different ways, outgrown their close confederation of schemes, strategies, and narrow escapes. Now Corey had no classes with Paul. Davy's family had moved 15 blocks farther away, and Chipper spent all his energy on soccer. The four boys lived at the edges of one another's lives, close enough to say hello to, too detached to use their old code words. And so they hear about the fire on the radio, and then they want to go check it out. And Corey makes himself to the building, and he sees all the wreckage, the piled up equipment, and he so he decides he's going to skip his track practice after school and go back to the market. Doesn't know exactly what he would do. He didn't know. There had to be something. There couldn't not be something. Less than 3 hours later, he said hello to a little boy, a child who looked like maybe a third grader, who was piling burnt metal fragments in a box and humming to himself. "We had a fire," the boy said in clear, unaccented English. "I know. I heard on the radio. Can I help?" said Corey. "Sure. There's a box over there." The boy pointed to a pile of cardboard cartons teetering near a jumble of burned boards. Corey took a carton from the pile and looked around. Where to begin? Maybe separating big pieces of glass from other debris. He needed gloves. "Tomorrow I'll bring some gloves," he said. The little boy said, "Yeah, you can get cut if you don't have gloves on." And then he meets the boy, finds out his name is Joey, and then, of course, he he meets Mr. Kim, and Mr. Kim looks at him and right away says, "This is one of the four 9-year-old boys who stole from me 6 years ago." So Kim, the owner of the store, knows who he is and knows that he stole from him years ago, right? And he doesn't seem to have forgiven him or let him off the hook. Corey explains to his track teacher that he's not going to be working. He's going to be taking a break from track for a bit because he's desperate and he wants to make things better. He wants to work at this grocery store repairing everything. And then he even has an interaction with one of his friends who sort of mocks him now. We discovered that Joey, the little boy, wants to play piano, but he can't practice anymore because he's staying at a different place. His uncles and they don't have a piano. Corey even learns to say hello in Korean. That's annyeong haseyo. So Kim and his family, they like him, and they like him being around. On the bottom of page 200, it reads, "On the morning of the 11th day of work with the Kim family, Corey woke with a surprising phrase in his head, the unnumbing of Corey Wilhouse. He lay still, listening to it." So that phrase comes from his own mind, that unnumbing of Corey Wilhouse. And he's thinking about all these things happening in the media. So it looks like this is like mid-90s, right? So he's thinking about the bombing in Oklahoma City, the shooting in Scotland, the starving in Africa, the killing in Bosnia. Don't think about it. Thinking about it feels terrible. Put it out of your mind. Look for things that make sense. And strangely, it all sort of worked out. You can't do anything about those horrors anyway. So Corey's struggling with his own thoughts, his own feelings of guilt and shame, and the world he lives in. But he's just trying his best to make things right. Corey runs into his friend Chipper and his friend Paul. Lets them know that he's working. He's working on what he wanted to do, helping out with the construction process. Chipper makes fun of him. He thinks, he says, good for you. Good for you. And then he walks away. So his friends are kind of unsure why he's doing this, why he's even helping out. Corey puts an ad in the paper trying to encourage people to donate money so this little boy can have his piano. And then, of course, we have the big meeting at the end of the story where he finally confronts Kim, the man who runs the store. And, so he's staring at him, doesn't understand what he's saying. Little Joey kind of translates for him. It seems like his father doesn't speak English. So Mr. Kim held Corey in his unblinking gaze. Corey's mind tried to wander towards harmless things. A piece of molding not trimmed yet, electrical outlet covers lined up on a bench, ready to be screwed into walls, manchi, hammer. The moment crept past. Nobody flinched. Corey wanted to disappear. He kept his eyes on Mr. Kim. He thought, this moment can't last for the rest of my life. It has to be over sometime. Finally, Mr. Kim spoke. No rage, no forgiveness, just that stare. And what he said didn't take very long. Joey translated. My dad says you already have your punishment. There was another silence. Then Joey went on. He says you'll figure out what it is. And so that night, Corey lies in bed thinking, it's not all right. It'll never be all right. And he remembered thinking, this moment can't last for the rest of the life. It'll be over sometime. But then he realizes the horrible truth is that the next truth, the new one, was this. He knew it couldn't get forgotten. He can't forget about this, and he has to deal with it. Corey turned off the light. He had an early day tomorrow. Although he had no idea how he would face Joey every day, he was determined to keep on working at Mr. Kim's. Until what? Until the store reopened, until Joey began humming again. Corey Wilhouse closed his eyes. All right, so we've got the incident that leads to him volunteering at the construction site. We've talked about the plot. In terms of the characters, I would say you've got Corey, but you've also got Corey's friends, Chipper, Paul. Trying to think if there are other. They're not really. Well, they are important to the story, but they don't have any dialogue. Paul, Davey, and Chipper. So those are his friends. I guess they're still his friends, but they used to be much closer than they are. And then we have Joey, and we have Mr. Kim. I would say. And then you also have his Corey's his track teacher, but not really important, right? So 6 years before the story opens, Corey and his friends stole from the store, and then a fire burns down. A fire burns down the store, and then Corey volunteers. Right? And then he has to confront. He has to confront Mr. Kim. And his guilt. And so we don't have a whole lot of time left in it, and I do want to get on to the next set of questions. But, you know, we can start to think about some of the, you know, the when you write your description of the situation that leads to his decision, and describing how he did this, you know, you can talk about him being the main character of the story, the protagonist. You can talk about his relationship to the other characters. We can look at the plot of the story. We could look at, you know, narration is one of our elements of narrative. It's not hugely important to this discussion here. But we could talk a little bit about conflict and theme. So, characters, plot, conflict, theme. We have the setting, and the setting of the story is important too. But I think what's more important, just given how much time we have left here, is a discussion about the conflict and the theme. So, I would say you've got a couple of main conflicts, and one would be Corey. I would say Corey versus Corey, or Corey versus his thoughts, right? It's like an internal battle, right? And then you've got Corey versus Mr. Kim, and then Corey versus his friends. So there are several conflicts breaking out in this story. I would argue that the main conflict is Corey's inner conflict. So when we look at a short story or any kind of narrative, there's always a conflict involved. There's you know, a problem to be solved, an issue to be thought about, something to be meditated on, right? That's what happens in a story. If there's no conflict, it's very hard to tell a story. So, but I would argue that the main conflict here is inside this young boy's mind. He's trying to deal with his own thoughts, his own emotions, his you know, his thoughts of, you know, doing something terrible and trying to make up for it. And he spends like more than a week and a half at this place fixing things up. So I would say that he's put his time in, and I think 11 days of construction is pretty awesome, right? So you got to keep that in mind, right? And then the theme, you know, I would say you've got words like redemption, forgiveness. So I would say the story is all about redemption, and forgiveness, and sort of like moving on. And, you know, I think that Corey has kind of come to the realization that he, you know, for the past, it sounds like for the past 6 years, right? So he's, you know, now that he's 15, he would have been a very, you know, it would have been very young. He was only in grade 9, so grade 4 or grade 5, right? So he was young. He's probably old enough to know better, but it does sound like he struggled with it for those years, for those many years. So that should give you some things to go with to answer that question. So you're just simply describing the situation that leads to his decision. So, you know, you could talk about his actions when he was 9, what he did, and how he comes to the decision that he's going to help out at this construction site, right? So what leads him to that decision, and then how does he spend his time as a volunteer? And so for that description, I mean, that's why I want to bring in the elements of narrative. So you can simply just describe what happened, but I think as a challenge to yourself and to receive full marks on the assignment, maybe talk about not just what he did, but maybe why he did it and what his motivations are, things like that. So I would, and then you can consult to our discussion on that story to lead you in the right direction. Question 2 is just simply, do you think he's learned anything? Excuse me. Has he learned anything from his experience as a volunteer? 1 or 2 sentences. So yes or no, and then back up your answer. So I would lean towards the yes in a story like this. It just seems like this young man has spent so much time thinking about the problem. It's consuming him. He's putting in a good effort to make things right. He's struggling with, not dealing with what happened. So, yeah. So it's going to be a yes or a no, and then you're going to have to back up your answer, right? So yes or no, right? So step 1, do you agree? Do you disagree? And then tell me why you are right. So back up your idea. I think he learned something, and here's why. And then I'd like you to reference the text, right? So reference the story or cite it directly. And by citing it directly, you're using quotation marks and you're giving me quotes right from the story, right? So, and that's what English teachers will typically ask from you when you're writing about a particular story, especially one like an assigned reading. And they want to know that you actually read the story, right? You didn't just sort of flip through it and skimmed it and said, there, I read it. They want to make sure you've read it and that you've done a close reading of it. But I think more importantly, it's important to focus on specific details of a story and just write about them to get a greater understanding of what happened. And that's what most, as you get into more like advanced English courses and English classes, that's the kind of work you get involved in, right? Just doing a very close reading of a story and just focusing on a particular set of details, right? Usually related to those elements of narrative, right? Like focusing on dialogue, focusing on narration, focusing on the setting, focusing on the theme, right? So it's a way to focus your discussion and to kind of drill down on what you're trying to say. And it's a much more convincing argument if you can do that. All right, question 3. Using the internet, you are to visit the website futurepreneur.ca for Futurepreneur Canada. The website will look different from how it appears in your textbook, The Road Ahead. What is Futurepreneur Canada? 1 or 2 sentences, right? So when this textbook was published, Futurepreneur Canada was known as the Canadian Youth Business Foundation. And so they dropped that name. They dropped the CYBF. And if you look in the textbook, it actually says www.cybf.ca. If you go to that website, it won't show up because that website doesn't exist anymore. But Futurepreneur does. So it's futurepreneur.ca, and I'll put up my browser up on the screen here, and we can look at that website together before we wrap up class for today. So there's that question, and then there's the question 4, which reads, what is an entrepreneur? 1 sentence. So that's the first part. What is an entrepreneur? It states in a link on the website, futurepreneur.ca, that entrepreneurs need money. List any 5 requirements mentioned in order for an entrepreneur to be assisted by Futurepreneur Canada. 5 marks. All right, so let's pull up that website. All right, just double check my share, make sure we're there. Okay, so I'm on Google, and you can type in, futurepreneur, and if you type that in, it's the first thing that comes up, futurepreneur. Um, let's see, it's a 1-minute walk from the Hockey Hall of Fame in downtown Toronto. It's always kind of hilarious to read the Google reviews. I'm just noticing those on the corner here. Um, One of them reads, "Worst place you can come to for help. Better go to the bank than this place." And the second person says they have great staff and are available every step of the way in your journey. So always interesting to read those reviews. And like all things, it's best to look at the average. So they average 4 stars out of 5, 66 reviews. That's pretty good. Looks like all of them are pretty positive, but there are some negative comments there. But back to our task at hand. So if I click on their website, Futurepreneur, celebrating our first 25 years. So they've been in operation for 25 years. And so we're on their main website, and it's good to just go over the format of a website. Most websites follow a typical pattern, and there's different variations on it, but they all pretty much follow a similar pattern. Very, very common today in the early 2020s, 2023 now, is that you'll see like a slide bar, and it's like a slideshow of things that they're trying to promote, like their Indigenous Entrepreneur Startup Program, for example, celebrating their 25 years of being in business. So you've got that. If you scroll down, you've got their services. So starting a business, mentoring an entrepreneur, how-tos and templates. That seems really important. And building your network. We've got our community. So these are success stories of people who got funding from Futurepreneur and then made something with that funding. So here's what's happening. Yeah, so I mean, the word entrepreneur is of course, and maybe we could start with that. If we just simply go to a dictionary definition, entrepreneur, it looks very much like a French word. Let's see. It sounds and looks very French. Yeah, so from the French, literally one who undertakes some task, equivalent to entreprendre, to undertake. Yeah, so it literally means someone who does something. But more specifically, you've got the dictionary definition. So a person who organizes and manages any enterprise, especially a business, usually with considerate initiative and risk. An employee of productive labor, a contractor. So that's, it's usually a business owner. And then there's that part, usually with considerable initiative and risk. So that's really important too. So when we think about entrepreneurs, we think about people who are taking risks and are starting up new ventures and starting new businesses and pushing themselves in exciting directions, trying to gather money to start brand new business ventures, or trying to hold on to the ones they have and encourage them to be successful. So that's what we're looking at here. So if we just go back to our questions, so remember so step 1, we have to identify what is Futurepreneur Canada. And if you go to their website, most websites will have a banner, and the banner will have their logo. If you click on the banner, it brings you back to the home page, and there'll be some kind of a menu across the top here. So this one's got a blog, resources, get involved, financing and mentorship. You've got the who we are. If you go to that about page and you open up that page, the about page, you will get a pretty comprehensive look at what this organization is, right? So who they are, the programs they do, how they help entrepreneurs. So you should be able to get as much information as you need from this about page, right? They also have, if we go to like resources, who we are, let's go to, if we go to media, they may have, they've got press releases. So this is when they're talking about stuff that they've done. So they've got a recent, I'm assuming it's a recent press release. It's the first one listed off this page. So back in September, they announced a new program to support young Indigenous entrepreneurs supported by Accenture. So there you go. So you've got the About page and you've got the media page. So I would look at those two to figure out what this group is all about. In terms of question 4, you're going to want to go under financing and mentorship. So they have they have financing and mentorship options for the benefits of mentorship for side hustle entrepreneurs, for Indigenous entrepreneurs, for Black entrepreneurs. But for question 4, I would go to the for entrepreneur section, and this is the financing, right? So if you want to be an entrepreneur, then you need money. You need capital. You need loans. You got to buy stuff. You've got to, you got to buy buildings. You got to buy supplies. You got to buy websites. You've got to train staff, right? So running a business is very expensive. A lot of expenses in the hopes of generating some revenue, right? But if you go to the financing section and we go to what we're looking here is the eligibility, right? So eligibility. Futurepreneur is eager to support aspiring business owners aged 18 to 39 years old who are Canadian citizens or permanent residents currently living in Canada. So that's important, right? So I'm too old for this, right? Um, I'm past 39, so I couldn't apply for it. So you'd have to be between the ages of 18 and 39. They continue by saying, to determine if we're the best fit for you, take a look at our basic eligibility criteria. Please note this is not a comprehensive list of Futurepreneur Startup Program eligibility criteria. Wow. So this is the general eligibility requirements. They have more, right? So it sounds like it's restrictive. And I guess that's kind of a negative word, but it is restrictive, and they're trying to only give the money to the people that think most deserve it and need it the most, right? But you've got a whole list of them, right? You have to demonstrate some training experience in your field related to your business idea. You create full-time sustainable employment for the applicants. You agree to work with a mentor for up to 2 years, right? So all of these things, right? So you just gotta mention, 5 of those criteria. And then they've got the benefits, applying, what to expect. They've got like a 10-step program, right? So you register with the startup program. You tell them about you and your business. You're going to draft your draft business plan and cash flow with us. So it looks to me like when people are applying to this kind of funding, they already have something up and running. They've already got something on the go, and this funding is going to help them take it to the next level. So I don't think you're coming to them with like an idea for a business. You probably have something already sort of running. And in the business, sometimes they call this seed money. So if somebody gives you seed money, then they're giving you something so you can develop an idea and turn that idea into a reality. But it sounds like this is like people already have something ready to go. Now, if we scroll back to the top of the page and we go to the resources and we go to our library, we can see some of the and this is some of the stuff you can talk about in assignment 3 as well. You can talk about like who they are and what things they offer the public, right? Because that's really what you're doing is you're creating like a profile for this business. Who are they? What do they do? Where are they established? Where do they operate out of? Because they have their brick and mortar, they have their physical store, but they also have their website. So they're offering a lot of digital services, but they're also offering a lot of in-person services too. So we've got our library here. I was just trying to find the business plan essentials because they said they had access to lots of resources, right? Okay, so we've got that. Let's see, resources, entrepreneurship pathway, business plan writer. Our interactive business plan writer has been designed to simplify the business planning process. Not only is this tool dynamic, allowing you to customize your plan, we've also provided tips and tricks and plenty of examples to guide you as you write. Okay, excellent. So if you're creating a business plan, they've got a free interactive tool that can help you do that, right? So think about that. They've got under more resources, they've got articles, crash courses, tips and tools, links to other websites. They have blog posts, financial templates, videos, business plan examples. They've got a cash flow template, a operating cash flow template. When I click on that link, I can download the tool and start taking control. So it looks like one of their former students actually helped develop this one, right? So it's a concise spreadsheet with instructions to help keep you on the top of your business finances. I'm clicking on download, but it doesn't really want to seem to download it, but that's okay. Because really, we're not really using the website. We're not downloading it. Maybe one day you will, and that'd be pretty cool. That'd be pretty awesome if you did. But really, you're just looking at the website and figuring out what kind of services this organization offers the public. So question 3, just simply tell us, what is Futurepreneur Canada? And question 4, you've got to give your definition of an entrepreneur, one sentence, and then find me 5 requirements that you have to have in order to be an entrepreneur. To be an entrepreneur that's assisted by Futurepreneur Canada. And I think that brings us to the end of today's discussion. Thanks for tuning in. We will meet again tomorrow and we'll continue our discussion of Unit 5.